We've taken a couple of days off in the middle of the week because we wanted to get away from the stress of everyday life and the constant rat race. And so here we are going hiking, slowly, calmly, sightseeing and breathing in the air of freedom and peace. We chose these itineraries because they're not difficult. You don't need to be an athlete, and also because there are beautiful, peaceful places to visit. We also like retracing Don Bosco's roads, those that he walked on, together with his youngsters. With a bit of imagination, you can almost hear them. We started in Turin, at Valdocco to be precise, early this morning, when everything was still quiet. But first, we saw the place where Don Bosco opened his first oratory. Today, there is an enormous complex near the city centre, but then there was only a country farmstead on the very outskirts. It's extraordinary to think that this was where Don Bosco gathered the youngsters, giving them a safe haven where they could be together, have fun, learn, and pray. A lot of them were orphans, abandoned and victims of abuse. He took them off the streets and brought them here, a heavenly oasis in the terrible life of the 19th century poor. Don Bosco often accompanied groups of oratory youngsters on hikes, perhaps passing by Superga. Normally, however, they arrived at his house, at Becchi, his birthplace, near Castelnuovo Don Bosco. It was a long, full day's walk, more or less the same as we're going to do today. High spirits dominated the trips, which for many youngsters were the only opportunity to escape the misery and long working hours. Often there was someone with musical instruments, and they would improvise a band. Every so often, the group stopped along the route at Friends of Don Bosco, and was welcomed, fed and watered with pleasure. Then, when they were sated, the youngsters would stage something, performing a type of street theatre, or perhaps some kind of acrobatic or magical act. The country folk were delighted, for it broke the daily routine. The sudden storm has stopped our walk. We've taken shelter under the Pino parish porch. Weren't we lucky? Look at the light and colours. The clouds and mist slowly clear to reveal the summits of hills bearing village bell towers and castle outlines. Everything fades into the distance. Don Bosco's trips made an obligatory stop at Chieri, where the saint lived for 10 years, from 1831 to 1841. We immediately go to the visitors' centre on the town's main road. This is where the saint studied and attended the seminary where there is now the small multimedia museum. Here in the dormitories is where Don Bosco and his schoolmates witnessed the apparition of Luigi Comollo, one of their companions who had died a few days earlier. At Chieri, every road, every square and every church bears witness to some episode linked to the life of Don Bosco. An example is Piazza Cavour, where the saint gathered together the young of the Città dell'Allegria, while Piazza Mazzini was where Don Bosco lived for a while, and he worked as an apprentice carpenter in this medieval building. But Chieri is well worth a visit, irrespective of the life of the saint. We go up to San Giorgio, that dominates the city with its curious bell tower, once the civic tower. From the tiny, silent piazza in front of the church, we look over the roofs of the old town, of what was an important medieval city of powerful bankers and large weaving mills. Having descended into Piazza Mazzini, we catch sight of the 16th century triumphal arch standing above the main road, over which, not far away, looks the sinuous facade of San Filippo. In Piazza Cavour, the church of San Bernardino offers visitors the Baroque dome of Bernardo Vittone's tricks of light and volume. The Middle Ages have left significant traces in Chieri, like the 14th century church dedicated to San Domenico. But it is the 15th century cathedral that attracts our attention, with its wide and not particularly high facade that does, however, show the Gothic upward leanings. In the baptistry, we discover the vivid 15th century frescoes of Guglielmetto Fantini. Having left Chieri, we continue our walk in Don Bosco's footsteps. We immerse ourselves in the intensively cultivated plain where, in the numerous farmsteads, they raise calves and produce quality milk and cheese. Today is hot, and we sweat walking on the scarcely shaded plain. Luckily, we soon find a drinking fountain that supplies us with fresh water. But looking around, we discover the statue commemorating San Domenico Savio, born in this small and modest house in the hamlet of San Giovanni at Riva presso Chieri. We have a good look at the map and stop to read the guidebook to learn some more.
Vedi, qui è nato San Domenico Savio, ma tutta questa è una terra di santi perché...
We discover that we are in the land of saints, so called because during the 19th century, many saints and beatified people were born in these parts. Following the guidebook, we cover the few kilometers of plain that separate us from the hills of Castelnuovo. Here we can visit the houses that, every day, witness the lives of men such as San Giuseppe Cafasso, patron saint of prisoners, or the beatified Giuseppe Alemanno, founder of the Consolata missionaries. In these tiny peaceful villages that we visit today as tourists, in these houses and on these walls, one still perceives something special. It is a sensation that even a non-believer can perceive. Visiting the saints' houses brings us to Morialdo, on the panoramic Pope's Road, from where, through the morning mist, we glimpse an imposing religious building. It is the Colle Don Bosco sanctuary that sits in the place where, on the 16th of August 1815, the saint was born. This magnificent complex dominates the valley and the foothills. Visible over a vast area, it is the point of reference. We descend into the Dream Meadow, the location of an important prophetic dream that indicated to the young Giovanni Bosco the road he should undertake. The dream occurred in this room, a few paces from the meadow, in the modest house with its simple, tiny rooms that testify to the absolute poverty of the peasantry of that time. In the building facing it, built later by his brother, there is still not only the room where the saint stayed when he came with the youngsters from the oratory, but also the small chapel in which the rosary and all the religious celebrations took place.
Brave così, ferme. Siamo venuti in gita. Ancora una, sorriso.
Having visited Colle Don Bosco, we can take the road home. Looking at the map, we see that there are at least 2 itineraries, but in our untethered wandering, we will hop here and there over the hills that separate us from Turin. Following the roads and paths of these hills, one breathes an ancient air with the scent of tradition. The rows of vines that comb the landscape appear unchangeable, the same as those from the times of Don Bosco. If then we make a small detour to Vezzolano Abbey, we discover a tiny jewel of Romanesque art set between peaceful sunny vineyards. Everything tells us of times we love but are no more, of peace and rhythms that in daily life we practice no longer. We enter an old cantina, where the authenticity of tradition is flanked by modern technology, and discover the typical wines of the Turin hills, such as Freisa and Chieri, varieties cultivated in the area since 1600. We stop to sip a few glasses of these exquisite nectars.
Buonissimo.
This is the land where quality agriculture thrives, knowing how to maintain the good things of the past and offer them again. The typical products, such as the delicate Piatlina onion of Andeseno, the exquisite sweet cherries of Paceto, or the rubata breadsticks of Chieri, are tangible proof that local production, close to people and far from the GMO multinationals, can exist and prosper. When the day draws to a close and the sun begins to set upon the horizon, the peaks of the Alps stand out like an immense theatre backdrop framing Piedmont. Scenes of this magnitude are the norm when touring these hills, especially during the spring, when the air is more crystalline. it is not difficult to find a trattoria, farm restaurant, or place of welcome, where it is possible to taste good cooking made with the flavors of local tradition or more modern tastes.
Ecco a voi, frittatina d'erbe e fiori spontanei.
Oh, che bellezza.
Buon inizio.
Grazie. Assaggiamo queste splendide frittatine.
After dinner, you can profit from the quiet of your room and relax reading a book, or you can enjoy the evening freshness on the balcony, listening to the quiet nocturnal noises of the countryside. Exploring this land with the gentle rhythm of a walker allows enjoying thrilling glimpses, discovering radically changing landscapes at each turn of the road. You can see the landscapes that Casorati consigned to his canvases, or imagine the life of a tiny medieval hamlet dominated by the castle's bulk. You can walk between the fields and meet the country folk at work, or stop in front of the Moglia farmstead, unaltered by time, where a young Don Bosco worked as a stable boy. When visiting these places, where the testimony of the past has not been wiped out in the name of development, there is not just the beauty and harmony to fill our eyes. There blossoms the idea that generations of men have shaped the natural landscape with small, well-balanced deeds, creating a fragile and unrepeatable scenic heritage. It would be a mortal sin to destroy it. Every road, every stone, and every tree contains a story. You just have to discover it.